Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the Polity. Of course, it's still the Polity reaching live from the nation's capital in Abuja. And joining us now, of course, to analyze the general analysis of 2023 general elections is Dr. Law Mefo. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good.
It's good to see you one more time today.
I'm good. I'm good.
All right, then let's quickly delve into it because of our time. Talking about the general analysis of 2023 elections. Let me not make it vague, but I'd like you to give a broader perspective of what your general analysis is of this said election.
Yeah, well, I think 2023 general elections in Nigeria, it should be one of the best and the worst at the same time. It's a contradiction. I would say about the best. Let me start from there. Because of the preparations, because of the kind of promises it held out. It started with a kind of build-up, to have a proper legal framework in place that will guarantee free, fair elections that will compare with anyone you can find anywhere in the world. And INEC, CSOs, and political analysts and democracy lovers were all in the fray, trying to amend the 2010 Electoral Act. Two things that we wanted, I should say we because I was part of the CSOs that fought for the 2022 Electoral Act. We wanted electronic component introduced into it, so that there will be proper authentication of voters. By that, we wanted to achieve one thing, that there will be no voting by proxy. Only those who are authentic owners of the voters' cards will show up and are accredited by way of machine. The idea wasn't really new. Because if you recall, 2015 general election, President Jonathan had already signed into law some amendments that permitted some administrative reforms and actions by INEC that allowed them to use a smart card reader. It didn't work well. So INEC upgraded to BVAS, bimodal voters accreditation. It's called bimodal in the sense that it went beyond the card reader that limited itself only to thumbprint. Here, BVAS has the capacity for facial recognition. What that means is that it ensured that if your thumbprint fails, your facial recognition will not fail. And in real deployment, the BVAS worked up to 90%, across the country. So it was a major milestone covered, and it helped to ensure what you may call free, fair election generally. The other thing we wanted was direct primaries, and somehow President Muhammad Buhari, as he then was, did not agree to sign that aspect into law. But they signed the electronic component. The issue of accreditation, issue of even uploading, uploading of results from polling units. Because I keep saying that our contemplation for Electoral Act Section 64, subsection 4, which says that returning officers and collation officers shall announce results subject to verification and confirmation of results uploaded from the polling unit. For me, it is the express provision of the law. In other words, uploading of a result from polling units is a clear provision of the law, and that is also the contemplation of the makers of the law. In other words, you cannot collate and announce results based on the 2022 Electoral Act without first uploading results from the polling units. This is the fantastic aspect of it, to end what happens between the polling units and the collation that starts at the ward. You know, because that is where the manipulation is done. Those who follow the results, you know, more often than not would alter the figures, and it will no longer reflect what the people said at the polling units. That's why Electoral Act says, the section I mentioned, 64 subsection 4, says that you upload. And INEC, part of the wonderful preparations by INEC, also came out with what they call electoral guidelines 2022. The electoral guidelines, very express. In fact, you know, the opening a paragraph says that these electoral guidelines is to give effect to 2022 Electoral Act. Do you understand that? So it became a derivative. So if you go to paragraph 137 of the electoral guideline, you will see that paragraph 137 is re-echoing that section 64 subsection 4, that you have to upload results from polling units. Now, the bad part. INEC now turned around after these wonderful preparations to say that they never promised anybody. We're not talking about your promise. We're talking about the law. The law.
Well, you know, they actually came out to say these were not in the Electoral Act, which is, of course, the constitution that would, of course, shape the election.
I have
so now they said it's promises.
I just mentioned, I just quoted section 64. Subsection 4. What do you understand? Is it ambiguous? It says, announce results subject to confirmation. Subject to confirmation. When you say something is subject to, you have made that condition precedent. That is how it is said in law. You make it condition precedent. What that means is that, you know, based on it, based on A, B will now be activated or come into effect. In other words, there can't be B unless there is A. That is what we mean by condition precedent.
The law, the judges have interpreted it in their own way.
In their own, you know, their interpretation is rather unfortunate. Because, you know, when you interpret the law in three ways. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, but first and foremost, the literary interpretation of the law. Do you understand that? You now begin to go into other doctrines of interpretation if the literary interpretation is not express enough. Do you understand what I'm saying? The makers of the law had something in mind. We were part of the process. And this was what we wanted to achieve. So if the INEC officials later turned around to abandon that express provision of the law, and the Court of Appeal, Presidential Election Petition Court, agreed with them, let us see what the Supreme Court will also say. But regardless of what the Supreme Court says, the fact remains that this was what we got from the Nigerian National Assembly. And you can still access the then Senate President, you know, Senator Ahmad Lawa. He's still in the Senate there. Make out time, book an appointment with him, and ask him, when they passed the Electoral Act 2022, what was the thinking? What was the thinking of the Senate? Of the Senate. He himself even said it in the national television, that the thinking is that any result that is not uploaded is invalid. Do you understand that? And there are clauses that say so. So INEC now abandoned this process when it came to presidential election. Do you understand that? Yes. And announced whatever they wanted. And what they announced was not authenticated, was not verified, you know, or along with the results that were uploaded from the polling units. That is where the problem is. That is what it made the beautiful preparations. The whole thing to turn out so, you know, contentious, whether we like it or not. There shouldn't be so much contention. They mentioned the number of cases that were dismissed. Yes, they can mention that and beat their chest, but they too know that they betrayed Nigerians. You know, and that is what democracy is about. Democracy is allowing the people to choose who will govern them, who will represent them. The only way you can do that is to calculate the votes and tell us who scored more lawful votes. As we speak, based on the verdict of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, right? This was bypassed also because they didn't look at the figures. They did not. They looked at technicalities and gave their judgment based on it. If you looked at the technicalities, you have actually abandoned the actual question that was asked. The reason the people went to court is to know who won. The only way you can establish who won is by looking at the figures. Now, if INEC uploaded, for example, 18,000 polling unit results that are unreadable, do you understand that? Is that not enough for the judges to ask them to provide the readable copies for them to know? Because 18,000 copies of the unreadable copies, carried a value of about 2.5 to 3 million votes.
Okay.
And that figure is enough to alter, the verdict who actually won, because the margin of win between Tinubu and Atiku is less than 2 million. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you have unreadable results that are over 18,000. So, but rather than look at all this, they decided to take the easy way out and do technicalities and even abused the petitioners. One of the judges was saying, were they expecting us to go to the marketplace to get evidence?
So speaking about technicality, sorry to cut you short. Yes. Some persons have said the election was nearly derailed by technology. That's one question. Do you think it was nearly?
It's not
emphasis on that word. But then the biometric devices weren't the problem. That's question 2. Do you think
it's not true? Well, it wasn't. I already told you that beavers worked, for more than 90% across Nigeria. In other words, beavers delivered. Do you understand that? Beavers delivered excellently. If you write an exam and you score 90%, that's excellent anywhere. Any exam where you return 90% is excellent.
It's excellent.
Anywhere in the world. So beavers delivered. It is not true that technology failed. No, it didn't fail. After all, the same beavers was able to yield up credible results in many instances. Because if you go to a Senate and the House of Reps, most of their results were uploaded, to the portal. Do you understand that? They were uploaded and they helped. But now, for INEC to now turn around to say that IREV is not a collation portal, the question is, when you got Electoral Act 2022 that says that you have to upload results from polling units, what measures did INEC take? Do you understand what I'm saying? To give effect to that section 64 subsection 4 that says that you announce result subject to confirmation and verification. If IREV is not to be relied on as a collation portal, then what collation portal did you put in place? Do you see the betrayer? Anybody can do what they did. And of course the Presidential Petition Tribunal took the escapist route. You understand that? They also betrayed Nigerians. Nigerians would want to know who really won that election. And there is no way you can know who won the election without looking at the figures.
But so now, in all of this, do you think digitizing the process was actually what made the election fail? And we've been doing this for the past 12 years.
It's deliberate.
How has this worked?
It's deliberate. The preparations were perfect, very perfect. Do you know federal government released almost 400 billion, right? fund this election. I remember the first tranche was 350 billion, and then later on we still had a supplementary of another 50 billion. 50 billion. In the neighborhood. And to ensure that we uploaded results from polling units, INEC voted 105 billion to ensure, activation of the electronic component of the preparations. But at the end of the day, they abandoned everything where it came to presidential election. So it's deliberate. It's not machine that failed. It was somebody.
So you think it was sabotaged? It was
sabotaged. It's obvious. So very obvious that during the presidential election collation process, that IREV was shut down. Somebody did it. Even so, and nobody is made to account for it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Since nobody is made to account for it, you should only expect that there will be a repeat of it in 2027. That's where the danger is. It didn't start today. If going to 2027 is even far. I mean, we have 3 elections happening soon. You see, the off-season elections, Kogi, Bayelsa, and Demo, right? Yeah. You wouldn't expect much. Different from what happened in a 2023 general election, because it's the same shenanigans, the same INEC officials, it's the same people that will go there and tell you. In fact, I read somewhere where INEC is even saying that they will not transmit, that they will not electronically transmit results from polling units. If you don't transmit results from polling units, the question is why? But
you remember, Dr. Law, that even as of this time last year, there were rumors everywhere that they were not going to transmit their results.
Yes.
And INEC categorically came out. They even granted a press conference stating that they were going to actually result in real time. I like to quote people. So what happened?
I was here on a program, with OG, right?
Yeah.
And on that program, we were told, that we are empaneled. The second person was Festus Okoye, the immediate past director of voter education and public enlightenment or whatever. He reassured everybody there, because I personally asked the question on set. Asked, look, are you sure? He assured us that nothing will make INEC not to transmit from the polling units. Here in your station, you can play it back. You can ask Ijoma, she'll give you the tape. So they assured us, and the Electoral Act, was conceptualized, and express provisions of the same Electoral Act. I keep mentioning section 64, subsection 4, that it says you cannot announce result without first confirming. You can't collate without confirming. What that means is that the condition precedent provided for by the Electoral Act was deliberately abandoned by INEC. It was deliberate.
So that means INEC has been compromised. Is it safe to say that?
INEC has always been compromised. Everybody knows it now. In fact, INEC, for me, has become the most effective election rigging machine in Nigeria.
So is it safe to equally say that INEC is a property of the government? Because now I would always ask this question over and over again, because I've said it's supposedly independent National Electoral Commission.
No, forget about that word, independent. It's like it never existed. You see, that is the essence. Independent, that means you are free to do what you ought to do according to the law.
Exactly.
And that is why National Assembly moved INEC to the front line, first line charge. In other words, the National Assembly didn't want INEC to be tied to the apron strings of the presidency.
Of the presidency, yes.
Do you understand that? That's a very beautiful move they made, freeing INEC. But the officials of INEC are suffering what we call piper syndrome. Who pays the piper dictates the tune. Who appoints the INEC chairman? The president. And there is always that tendency for the INEC chairman to watch the body language of the president. They have often, it's not a Mahmoud Yakubu thing. It has been like that since 1999. Because the president is the appointer of the INEC chairman and all the commissioners, both resident and national commissioners. They owe their allegiance to the appointer, which is the president. So, in other words, it means that if you want a free and fair election, you don't look at INEC, you look at the president. Do you get the point? Because INEC is not looking at Nigerian masses. INEC is looking at the president, his body language. Who does he want? So, you will see that victories across board are reflective of this major problem you have in the appointing process. Recruitment of INEC leadership is the number1 problem we have in Nigeria. Do you understand that? There is no other reason. Otherwise, how can Professor Mahmoud, who actually supplied some of the clauses you see passed by National Assembly, he was part of the people that drafted. So what happened? Something on thin hands that he cannot say no to. Do you understand what I'm saying? If, for example, INEC transmitted presidential election results from the polling units, you don't look. You take your calculator and arrive at the winner. Don't need anybody to tell you, because you will see it up there. From anywhere in the world, you will access it. They deliberately frustrated it. Even some of the results they announced, like Rivers, for example, is not even reflective of what they uploaded on their own, according to BBC analysis. Do you understand what I'm saying? Some of the people that are appointed as returning officers don't exist. Or, yes, for example, there is one in the same Rivers who gave the name of a school, and the BBC went to that school and there is no such staff. The school does not exist. So where is the integrity? Do you understand? Where is the integrity of the process? Because if one who is returning your results does not even exist in the real sense of the word, because if you have no address, where do we trace you? Do you understand what I'm saying? And for an individual to give a fictitious address, the person has actually committed a crime. You don't even know whether the name is even that person's name. That is the issue here. In other words, those who want to rig election can pass through some of these dubious INEC officials and recruit the kind of people they want that will give them what they want. So you will see that is one level of the problem. Then you come to what you call election security. Election security essentially is that of Nigeria Police. Nigeria Police Force is the modern agency where it comes to modern architecture, where every other security agency will derive its essence from. Even the army is a derivative of Nigeria Police. All of them. So you discover that whoever is assisting the army, civil defense, all of them in election security, they are actually there on the invitation of the police. Yeah. If the police say they don't need the army cannot force itself on an election. But there's the issue of the superiority with the army and in election security. You understand what I'm saying? The army does not have a statutory role. But in general security, which of course elections come under, they have role, but on invitation. For example, if you go to any state and see the soldiers, they are there on invitation. The chief of army staff cannot just deploy people to internal security without invitation by the governor. Do you see where the problem is? Or directive from the president, who is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So it is on invitation. If you bring in the soldiers, whatever happens, you take responsibility. You that brought them in. You see where the problem is? So our elections are militarized based on this. Well, we can say that given the kind of security situation in many states of the country, where you really have red flags everywhere. Where you have what we call non-state actors, ungoverned space is so large. Go to a place like Imo now. As many as 7 local governments, right? I am not sure election will be able to hold in those places. By now, I expect that they should have been able to do a kind of problem security challenge analysis and tell Nigerians where elections will hold in Imo.
In Imo, and where it won't hold.
And where it will not hold. And that is why I am talking about transmitting results from polling units, because what they will now do is that those places where elections will not hold will be written. They'll be doing that. And that is why the Electoral Act is saying transmit from the polling unit. So if you don't transmit, no election took place there. But if INEC says they will not transmit, how can you now objectively prove that the election did not take place in those places where results are provided? Do you see where we are? And that is why many of us are saying we're not here practicing democracy. That what we practice is civil rule. There are two different things. Democracy is where the people decide who they want.
Who they want.
Nigerians are still not allowed to decide who they want. Therefore, you don't have democracy. It's a simple fact. You know, it doesn't require a professor of political science to explain this. Democracy is the will of the majority. That means that is what you refer to as lawful votes. Majority of lawful votes. The majority, you know, have said that it is you.
And that is what they get.
And that is what they get. But when you now bypass the Electoral Act, transmission of results, you know, transmitting means moving it from polling unit doesn't mean carrying the paper. Because some will even argue and say, look, carrying the paper to the collation center is transmission. That is evil.
How is that electronic in any way?
I've never seen this kind of thing, but we have seen people. Politicians don't care. What they want is to win. But you know one thing, you know, the world over, every politician wants to win. That is why you need institutions. That's why you need the law.
But they need to go through the right process to actually win all of this.
They will not want to go through the right process. So don't blame Nigeria.
So it's a do or die affair for them.
Yes. Okay. It is the law. The enforcers of the law are the ones that will compel them to fall in line.
To fall in line. Okay. All right. Let's quickly dive into technologies for this general election.
Yes.
I'd like to ask one major question, because some persons have been clamoring for electronic voting, because we have to first get it right with even the Beavers and IRF first before we can proceed to the electronic voting. The digital technology help reduce fraud in this said election, because of course, speaking from the numbers, usually we do see 5 million from Kano, lots of millions from Kaduna, plenty millions from Katsina. Exactly, but in this past election, it wasn't exactly that same way. So could it be said that it actually helped reduce fraud in election?
That's why I said that Beavers worked up to 90%.
90%, okay.
Indeed, that was what reduced all these things, by eliminating the fictitious votes that normally come from those places. You mentioned a place like Kano. You know, in the past, they were delivering 2 million, 3 million. Rivers, 2 million. You know, Kaduna, 2 million.
I mean, the people were even anticipating, they even gave them the Kardashian.
These are the figures they now supplied. Do you understand that? And if you compare the figures of the number of Nigerians that purportedly voted in 2019 to those that voted in 2023 presidential election, I mean, that of 2023 is approximately 25 million. But that of 2019 was about 35 million. What happened to the balance of 10 million? This will show, despite, and remember that in the 2023 election, you know, it was more upbeat. A lot of people, you know, first-time voters were eager to really vote, unlike what happened in the previous elections. And yet, 2023 delivered, you know, lesser number than 2019, 2023. 2015, you know, 2011, and so on and so forth. In 2007, under Professor Boris Iwu, the figure, you need to see the figure with which he announced Yar'Adua as the president of Nigeria. The figure is out of this world. And while he was doing that, while he was announcing Yar'Adua, the president of Nigeria, collection of results were still going on in some states. And yet he had already arrived at the winner.
The conclusion.
He had arrived at the winner. And that is a repeat of history, going by what Mahmoud did. Because Mahmoud till today cannot give us the figures. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you know that the figures with which you announced President Tinubu, the president-elect, and you know he ultimately became sworn in as substantive president, show us the figures as you uploaded. And you know, I keep saying, one of the lapses also is the poverty of ideas by the opposition political parties. You know, opposition parties lacked leadership and cohesion. And they broke up into pieces, into 4 factions. You know, the main opposition PDP broke up into the weaker faction, into you had the weaker faction, you had the P2B faction. I call Labour under the presidential race of P2B, a PDP faction.
Because Labour was not exactly. It was mostly people from PDP that moved.
People followed him. So Labour became a faction. Even Kwankwaso, who came on the banner of a NNPP, is also a product of the PDP. He was a governor of PDP, you know, a senator of PDP. He was also minister of the PDP. Everything, Kwankwaso has always been PDP. And yet, he flew the flag of a different party. And divided the votes in Kano. So imagine what would have happened if the PDP repeated their 2019 article BTK.
Article, it would have been, I mean, some persons have said that should have happened.
You see, that's why I said they lacked cohesion. Because they should have seen it that would be, you know, had the clout to divide the party significantly. And he did. And now the PDP, to worsen their case, also wished away Wike and 4 other governors. They fought like wounded lion.
I mean, it's 6 million votes from the Labour Party and it's 6 million votes from PDP would have
that is 12
already.
In fact, the opposition political party figures in terms of the votes they took away or won for their own factions is 14 million. PDP is 8.something million. So if they had come together and fielded, you know, a common candidate, it's a matter of negotiation. I believe that the exit of Obi was preventable if the PDP actually had a clear-headed, you know, leadership.
He wanted the seats. Article 2 wanted the seats. So what would have happened?
Obi has age on his side. What stops Atiku from accepting to run for a single term? Didn't Mandela run for a term? Refused to continue. As a statesman, can't you do that for your party? Do you understand what I'm saying? You can take a term, right? You can take a single term. And there is nothing that says you can even win a second term, even if you insist on a second term. Jonathan went for second term and didn't get it. Do you get my point? So statesmen should grow beyond self-interest. And of course, you know that the constitution of the PDP, you know, contemplated rotation of presidential power between North and South Nigeria. So the major argument of Obi and his supporters was that it was the turn of the South. Do you see the problem? Now, if Atiku could see through this, do you understand what I'm saying? You will see the greater need to really negotiate. Do you understand what I'm saying? Really negotiate. You must find ways of placating the injured side. That is it. Negotiation. Politics is about negotiation. Leadership is negotiation. And that is what makes you a leader. You should be able to negotiate to save your party. Do you understand that? And ensure victory. Because the best time for the PDP to return to power was in 2023. Do you understand that? It would have easily returned to power. But they decided to split up into factions. Do you understand that? And Tinubu, a master strategist, helped them to keep it so.
But do you think, how do you think this is actually going to be, how is it going to actually majorly affect the 3-off cycle elections happening, let's say, Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa?
Politics is local. You know, if you notice the governorship and the House of Assembly elections in this 2023, it didn't quite reflect the weights of the various political parties. That will show you
the person.
Yes, it's the person. It's the person. For example, if you go to Imo, an incumbent is running. Hope Uzodimma is a bulldozer. The other side can say a big one. It's a bulldozer. He's desperate. He can do anything
to get it.
Do you understand that? That's why I said, if you want to have a free and fair election in Imo, transmit results from polling units, so that where elections don't or do not take place, they should not return any figures.
But are those places part of where INEC has written or released that elections will take place in those places? Because of course the state of
they haven't told us
where that is exactly
whether they will transmit or not transmit. But all I am saying is, if INEC is not ready to transmit results from polling units and then show real time, the results will be manipulated. The two incumbents running to return, Diri, you know, Senator Diri is also running to return. Hope Uzodimma is running to return. All of these will come to pass November 11. It's upon us already, right?
Yes, it's
so about 3 weeks from now, if not less. You know, so if you don't transmit result, what it means is that they will procure from EC8A, from INEC officials, and fill those forms out.
Those forms out.
How did Hope Uzodimma become the governor of Imo State?
No, there's still that name.
Listen. Emeki Hedio has scored 273,000 votes. Hope Uzodimma scored 96,000 votes and came fourth. Supreme Court, after looking at from EC88, A, supplied by Hope Uzodimma, they catapulted Hope Uzodimma from 96,000 to beyond 273,000. How? Based on just about 360 polling unit results. Was it only Hope that contested the election in those places? Do you get the point? So, you know, for curious reasons, Supreme Court said, well, since INEC, that's why I keep talking about INEC. I keep calling them out. Why did the Supreme Court give it to Hope Uzodimma, despite the curious circumstances? The Supreme Court wanted INEC to supply the from EC8A that they cancelled in those 360 something words in Imo. Till today, INEC refused to provide those.
But of course, the same thing had played out in the appellate court during elections, where the judge said you wouldn't expect us to go to the market. And you know, there was lots of back and forth between the Labour Party and INEC at some point when they requested for most of those forms, and INEC said they had to pay for
you see,
most of this.
Listen. If you want to go into any election and you don't have your foot soldiers in every polling unit, forget that election. Just forget it. And that was what happened to Labour particularly. They didn't have enough polling unit agents. They didn't have the full complements. And even many of their foot soldiers that represented them in the polling units, many of them sold out. So when they wanted to go on litigation, they needed to collect their own results, and that is from EC8A, given by INEC to party officials and the police and the polling units. That is what you take back to your principal. That is how to prepare for litigation. And they didn't provide it before the tribunal. Do you understand that? They did not. It's not even if INEC refused to give you, where is your own? Do you see where the problem is? They didn't have the full complements of this. And that was why I was also crying. I said Labour and PDP and even the NNPP, that's Kwankwaso, must work together. So that where you don't have from EC8A,
you get from this person. But do you think they were looking at the longer run or the shorter run? Because at some point people were like, oh, of course it's always about personal interest, and now you've outrightly said some of the Labour Party people even sold out. But then it begs the question, you know, before the election there were a lot of back and forth about Labour Party not having structure.
Yes, of course, you can.
So this structure is part
of the issue here.
Yeah.
When you say structure, we are talking about human beings. Human beings that will represent you, ready to die for you, defend your votes in the polling units there. And the least they can do for you is to collect from EC8A. If Labour had it, they would have been able to prove that Obi won. And that is the only way you can prove victory. Let me give you 3 instances.
Okay.
The gubernatorial election in Kano was obtained based on from EC8A. That of Kaduna was declared inconclusive based on from EC8A. That of Nasarawa obtained based on from EC8A. Do you understand that? So if you don't have from EC8A, INEC will frustrate everything because they will not give you. You know, our laws are so terrible that INEC is not even required by law to prove to the tribunal how they conducted election. What our law does is to dump the onus on the petitioner and make INEC a party. INEC is not a party, you know, to the petition. That means INEC is now joining forces with the victor, the person they already declared the winner, to, you know, as a way of justifying what they did. So the petitioner is at the short end of the stick. Being at the short end of the stick means that because INEC has now become a party to the litigation, they will do everything humanly possible to prove that themselves are right. That is one of the amendments you need. INEC, for example, if our law says you prove how you declared somebody the winner, INEC would have been compelled to produce the from EC8A to the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Okay,
I like the fact that you mentioned INEC defending itself, yeah? So in one breath, because we have limited time, I like to read from our national dailies from this morning. The Punch said INEC defends 2023 polls.
Yeah.
Says 712 petition dismissed. That's on one hand. The Nigerian Tribune has it that INEC releases statistics on 2023 election, says 891 petitions dismissed, withdrawn. Of course, the numbers don't tally. That's number one. Then number two, dismissal of all of these things. Does it mean that it was actually a credible election? And then how does this actually impact on the next election? Because some persons have even said that INEC has too many cases in court, that the judges are overwhelmed, and pre-election matters, you know, parties and all of that together.
INEC is no longer a credible institution. They can say anything about themselves. Nigerians are no longer listening. Do you understand what I'm saying? And they should worry about that. Perception is everything. Perception is bigger than reality in psychology. That is why we pay more attention to perception. than we pay to reality. Because it is perception that will really govern the actions of people. If you call for a fresh election, presidential election today, I'm not sure that 10 million Nigerians will agree to come out. Do you understand that? Why? Because they don't believe. They don't believe there will be credible outcome. So what are you saying? You're thumping your chest that cases are dismissed based on technicalities? Let me tell you. Any election petition that is dismissed without the judge calculating the figures is based on technicality and therefore useless. You have actually betrayed the people. Vote is not technicality. Somebody voted for A or voted for B. Calculate their figures. That's all we need. Every other issue should go to pre or post election. And let me quickly also point out, since we are rounding up, you know, you will discover a criminal. They will say they will tell you, well, it's a pre-election matter that he has been overtaken by events. So you will now dump a criminal on the system. Do you understand what I'm saying? Not because the facts didn't come to light before the election. It should no longer count. What is that? In fact, there is this saying that time does not run out on the crown. What does that mean? That there is no time limit placed on any criminal action. If you commit a crime, you are not qualified to be this or be that based on express provisions of the law, the Constitution. Whenever we discover it, you leave the office. But that is not how our law is now. Our law is not saying that if the person is an armed robber, but nobody brought it before the election, then you have to wait till another. That means the law allows a career criminal to be a power. Do you understand that? That's our law. These are some of the laws we need to deal with, do away with. Another law that is so horrible, which I am sure doesn't happen anywhere in the world. You swear in somebody, an honorable member, House of Assembly, House of Reps, Senator, Governor, President and Vice, whereas their matter, the validity of their election is yet to be determined by the election tribunal. It doesn't happen anywhere. So you must finish everything about litigation. And like I said, where it comes to criminal matters, you cannot leave the person because the issue came late. It's one of the problems articles of petition is facing now. Okay,
we were going to get to that, but now that you mentioned it, like that, Supreme Court hears article BAPM's appeals come October 23rd, and they said, and in another paper which is not here, they said the Supreme Court has accepted. So what do you think would actually happen? What? Accepted is verdict, not verdict, is appeal, and that's the Chicago, this thing, which we do not know whether
they haven't accepted. So they will decide that on Monday. On Monday, they haven't sat now. They just constituted the panel.
The panels, yeah.
You know, I think it's supposed to be chaired by someone like Datijo, but you know, His Lordship Justice Datijo. When I checked the time he entered the Supreme Court, he ought to be retiring this month. So why suddenly we say the chairmanship of? Do you understand what I'm saying? Maybe my calculation may be wrong, but you know. Why do you understand that? He's not even a member, you know, because he's number one on the list I saw last night, you know, and number one is number one. He's likely to chair the panel, you know. So say they will decide whether or not to accept what article got from the U.S. Chicago, you know, from Maldonado's court that they issued the order that. The documents, everything about Tinubu by his Chicago State University should be released article. He has filed. But they will sit on it on Monday. That is when they will start. They will now look at the merits, the arguments and everything. Maybe take another day or two to give judgment on it.
Okay.
If they give judgment in affirmative, what it means is that they will incorporate the fresh evidence in the appeal of article. If they refuse to accept it, based on technicalities. For example, they can tell you he came late, not that it is not right, but he came late and they cannot really bring it in now. It becomes a problem of technicality. Then they will base everything on what transpired in the presidential election petition court. You know, the Supreme Court, where it comes to presidential petition, is an appellate court. You know, and the appellate court is a review court. They don't start new processes. And that is why they ordinarily don't accept new evidence. But there is a new practice direction. I have seen in the case between Ruhopu Zodema and Senator Ositi Zunasa, you know, they were able to admit fresh evidence. And they gave thresholds that you must meet before they can accept fresh evidence. Not just the Supreme Court, any court, as a matter of fact. So it becomes a new practice direction, which gives a chance, you know, that articles and new evidence, you know, may be admitted. That said, you know, the whole thing is simply not right. We ought to, our elections ought to be getting better. Do you understand that? Yes, the laws are getting better, but INEC is not getting any better. I keep saying this. INEC, you see, when the framers of a law frame a law, they expect that the law will be implemented by decent people, by honest people. Do you understand what I'm saying? The framers of a law will not contemplate that the laws will be implemented by criminals. So when you have dishonest people preside over election processes, you get this kind of confusion. You know, they create the latitude for confusion and conflict. At the end of the day, they dump the election process on the courts. And our courts also lack integrity now. I was listening to Justice Sofo, you know. Justice Sofo is the chief judge of the Federal Capital Territory. He said just yesterday or day before yesterday that the courts, once the courts lose the confidence of the people will have what they are cutting will be anarchy.
All right. I would like you to leave a final note with our viewers, like in 1 minute, what to expect from, there's going to be a lot happening over the next week from the court cases, and then that's preparation for elections and all of that. So that's a lot.
You know, I want to appeal to Nigerians, no matter the outcome at the Supreme Court, because going by the timetable, the Supreme Court will give the final verdict on the presidential election petition on or before the 6th of November.
That's before the governorship election.
Yes. Do you understand what I'm saying? On or before. You know, they will give on presidential election. Do you get the point? Whatever the outcome is, Nigerians should take it, right? They should take it, eschew violence, and work towards compelling INEC to follow through the Electoral Act and not leave it to their discretion. We must work to remove all the discretionary powers of INEC. You have to transmit results from polling units. Where you cannot do so, you cannot declare results. That is what we need in 2027.
Okay.
Once you do that, you hand the power over to the people. Because they will, by that token, be in a position to determine the outcome of the 27 general elections. And on Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo, I have these two things to say. INEC must transmit results from polling units because that is the express provision of Electoral Act 2022 subsection 64, section 64 subsection 4 that you announce result subject to confirmation of results uploaded for the polling units. That's a condition precedent. They must obey it. It's a lawful provision. And the Nigeria Police Force, they need to do something about election security, particularly in Imo. And even in Kogi. Do you understand what I'm saying? They need to, the IGO police, and once called for town halls, the IGO police needs to move out to these 3 states and engage the youths in town hall.
All right, Dr. Law.
Once he's able to do that, it's not always the number of boots on the ground, the number of AK-47.
Exactly.
The people that will die in this process are your citizens. They are your citizens. Your job is not to kill anybody.
It's to protect them.
It's to protect them.
All right.
So what are they doing to ensure election security? IG police should try more of non-kinetic. Engage the people.
Okay, I'm sure they're listening. Thank you very much. That was a powerful one, Dr.
Thank you.
All right, it's always insightful with you on the program with us. It will be good to have you some other time. Of course, Dr. Law.
The pleasure is always mine.
All right, viewers at home, this is where we wrap it up for the Polity for today. And of course, this week, thank you to our producers, Ayobami, Folari, and of course, our MCR guys, that's in person of Daniel, and maybe some other people over the week. And of course, shout out to famous Amadine. All right, this is where we draw the curtain for today for the Polity. See you same time, same station next week. I remain Messi. Bye-bye today. Bye.